Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. As we know, these last couple of weeks have been very exciting with silver. There had been a $34 ceiling that had seemed to be impassable at the start of this year, and these last 2 weeks, not only has silver gone past 34, it breezed right by 35, busted through the $36 ceiling, and now has seemingly stabilized at around $36.50. This, of course, has raised that question. Do we think it's going to go higher? Do we think it's going to come back down? What should I do with my silver? Today we're going to be taking a look at the history of silver, the last 50 years, what's made it go up, what's made it go down, and can we use that to predict what we think is going to happen to our silver in the next upcoming years. So join me as we investigate that together. Hey everyone, welcome to Stacked Treasures. As we know, these last couple of weeks, silver's value has increased steadily, and as of today, June 17th, it's even past the $37 mark. So it's exciting to see how much higher silver will go. But as always, whenever we start seeing increases like this, it raises the question, should I sell my silver? Should I buy? What do we think is going to happen? Now, I find myself, whenever I start to ask those questions, I like to take a look at the history of silver. What caused it to increase before? What caused it to decrease? And where do we think we are today? Are we seeing any similar patterns? Because that can help determine for us what we think we should do. So what I've done here is taking a look at silver the past 50 years. And what this chart is showing is the average value of silver for each year. And when we take a look at it, we see a couple of very obvious things that begs our questions as to what happened. We've got two spikes, one in 1980, one in 2011. We've got a period of low value for silver and stagnation that occurred for just about 15 years. And then we've got these two areas of what looks to be nice, sustainable growth. And so what I want to do is examine those areas, what caused those things to occur, to see if we think it's happening again. Now, one thing I've always hated about graphs like these is that it shows the actual value of silver, which means you're not seeing the impact of inflation. If we go back to 1975, the silver cost was $4.43 per ounce. But we all know that $4.43 in 1975 had a lot more purchasing power than it does in 2025. So what I've done is I've taken all of these values and I've normalized them, creating a chart that lets us see what the purchasing power of silver was throughout those years, all with the 2025 mindset, because that lets us see really how much silver has increased in value and how much it's really decreased in value, because the purchasing power is what matters to us. And this chart here shows us the purchasing power changes, all with that 2025 mindset. $4.43 in 1975 is the equivalent of $26.33 today. And so that's our starting point. And then we see those peaks, those two big peaks still persist, that period of stagnation still persists, and we have these periods of growth here. Now, when we take a first look at the chart, 1980 is the obvious huge peak. What happened here? And we can see that in 1980, the price of silver was yearly average around $20, which is the equivalent of $81.42 today. Now, what's important to note is in 1980, silver actually peaked at around $50 an ounce, which in 2025 terms would be close to $200 an ounce today, which is crazy to think about. And so what happened? Well, in 1980, there were really two big things that occurred. One is that it was a period of high inflation for several years. Late 70s, early 80s, inflation was over 10%, for a significant number of those years. Anytime you have inflation that is high, people from an investment perspective like to put their money in precious metals because they're typically a hedge against inflation. Now, this was taken to the extreme with the Hunt brothers. So the Hunt brothers really looked by the end of the 70s and started 1980, they wanted to corner the market in silver. And so they purchased as much as they can. And when I say as much as they can, I mean that quite literally. At their peak, it is estimated that the Hunt brothers, outside of government-owned silver, owned 1/3 of the world's supply of silver, which is absurd to think about. And it was because of that attempt to corner their market why we see this enormous increase in the price. However, it's unsustainable. They're borrowing money, buying on margins, and they simply can't keep up with that. And so what happens whenever that type of really kind of an artificial increase in value, because it's driven by people's behavior, is that it drops. They couldn't hold on to the silver. It crashed. Regulations, were talked about. Companies were upset over what was happening, and it just plummeted down, effectively going to a purchasing power equivalent of what it was before the Hunt brothers tried to corner the market. And that makes sense. It normalized. Individuals' behavior is often unsustainable for maintaining value of anything because people's behavior changes all the time. And so it kind of reduced back to a more $25, $26 value. And then it decreased again and continued to decrease. And we see in the 90s and up to about the mid-2000s, silver really floundered. And it had the purchasing power of around $8 to $10 throughout this time period, never really changing all that much. For people who bought high, this was devastating for them. And for people who bought it when it was at kind of their more traditional value, it was a big hit as well. So what happened? Series of events happened. First thing is, during the 90s and early 2000s, inflation was very low. So people weren't concerned about investing in precious metals against the hedge of inflation, because when inflation is 1%, 2%, 3%, that's not usually their chief concerns, and are investing in other areas. The 90s was the big dot-com area, which obviously then ended up booming and then busting shortly thereafter, but a lot of investment was going there, not going into silver, so no one's really speculating on it. So investor demand is decreasing. In addition, industrial demand is decreasing. One of the larger consumers of silver was the photography industry for film. In the 90s, photography was shifting away from film and moving into digital photography. So now the industrial demand of silver is reduced, and a lot of the industrial demand that we have today with green energy, solar panels, electric vehicles didn't exist back then, so there's nothing to raise it back up. So you've got speculator demand reduced, and you've got industrial demand reduced. The third hit is the supply. During this time, we've got new mines opening, and we have increased efficiency in mining, particularly in China, Australia, Latin, and South America. And one very important part to be aware of with silver mining and silver extraction is that around 70 to 75% of all silver is mined as a byproduct. Those mines were not created with silver as the thought. Those are mines for copper, gold, zinc, or lead. During the extraction and refinement process, silver is a byproduct, and so it acts as a supplemental income for those mining operations. But that's 70 to 75% of the supply. And that's critical to understand, because what that means is a very large the vast majority of the supply of silver is not based on the demand for silver. It's based on the demand of those other metals. And so at this time, you've got a increasing supply and reduced demand. And that results in obviously peak lows for silver and that stagnation that we see. Now in the mid-2000s, you start to see silver rise again. What's causing it to get out of this slump? Again, a couple of factors. One of them, we've got views of the dollar is weakening. 2008 was the big financial crisis with the home marketing. People are upset and distrustful of traditional investments. And so you have investor demand again looking to, again, hedge against inflation and concern about the value of the dollar. So you've got investor demand increasing. You've got speculators, considering silver as a good buy. In addition, industrial demand is picking up again. Why? Because during this time, there's more use of silver in electronics than before, in battery use, and probably most importantly, solar panels are really coming into the forefront. So you've got increased industrial demand. You've got speculators who are concerned about the value of the dollar. And supply has remained stagnant. So now you've got your demand increasing, supply is staying the same, and you've got this increase in the value. Now it did peak in 2011. And I think what it is peaks of silver tend to be created by the speculators who are looking at it purely from a concern over fear of what might happen to the dollar. That's what happened in 1980, and that seemingly is what happened in 2011. And what I hate about that is, again, people's behavior, their fears are fickle. And so it dropped again, and just like in 1980, it normalized to the purchasing power of right before. And now we're approaching our current times, and we're seeing the price increase. And I don't have 2025 listed here because we're still in 2025, but obviously we're standing around $37 an ounce right now. So we're showing effectively another, what looks to be another increase, steady increase in the value. And so why do we think we're seeing that? Well, I think just like before, we've got a confluence of factors here. We've got concerns over the dollar again and inflation. With $37 trillion of debt in the United States, spending by the government is reckless. So we have people that are concerned about inflation. People are concerned about the tariffs and those impacts. So that tends to intrigue investors into going into precious metals. On top of that, industrial demand is booming. The last 4 years have consecutively shown record demand for silver in industrial use, and 2025 is looking to keep on pace with that. We have got electronics, or more electronics now than ever before, and you've got industrialization in other areas of the world that are increasing their demand for silver. We've got China, India are two of the big ones. Green energy and solar panels, bigger now than ever before. They're a big user of silver. And electric vehicles, which are becoming significantly more popular, significant more demand, and in some areas potentially required to be used. They're trying to phase out gas. And electric vehicles, they use some silver now, but recent developments regarding batteries for electric vehicles could potentially be a huge driver in silver's value. Right now, with the standard lithium-ion batteries, they use a relatively small amount, but the biggest problems that those batteries have is they're not good at maintaining charge, and they take a very long time to charge. Both of those are items that are negatives on the batteries. Now, some recent battery usage that uses up to 1 kilogram of silver, which is approximately 32 ounces of silver. We're talking a significant amount here. could potentially halve the charging time while simultaneously increasing the length of time that the charge is held in the battery. So we're talking about less time to gas up, if you will, and a longer time before you have to gas up again. If that continues, that trend continues, and the shift goes over to more electric vehicles, and the battery use for that silver is about a kilogram for it, I expect silver's value to go booming. Because just like before, the supply of silver is roughly the same. It's not going up significantly. Now, the last couple of months, there was a new silver deposit along with copper and gold in the Andes that was discovered. And obviously, if that goes up and running, yes, expect value to go down. But there are some technical hurdles for that mine. It's elevated region, which makes it much more difficult to set up the mining operation. And setting up mining operations are not something that can just happen overnight. It takes a long time to build it in, to get everything there, get the infrastructure in place. There's environmental considerations as well, so you have potential regulatory items that have to be worked out before it. So yes, I think it'll probably ultimately happen because it's a big influx for the economy in that area, but it's not going to happen right away. And industrial demand for silver is going to continue to increase. And I think that's what we're seeing. And I think that's why we're seeing this increase in value now. We do have that speculation from individuals, but I think the lion's share of silver's increase in value at the current moment is due to the realization of its industrial use and that industrial demand. And that's helping to fuel the speculators and the investors into investing in it as well. And so you get the double dose of increased demand, and that's why we see silver going up. So as to if you should sell it or not, obviously this depends on everyone's personal situation. If you were able to buy silver low, and the opportunity to sell it at a significant profit is there for you, and you need the money, then it's a good opportunity to do so. But if you don't have to, if it's not pressing, then I think hold on to it, because I think it is going to continue to increase in value in the next upcoming years. How high it goes is obviously impossible for anyone to tell, because you can't predict the future and you just don't know what's going to go in store for you. But when it comes to the supply of silver, outside of that new mine, I'm not aware of anything else that's on the horizon for it. When it comes to demand, I think the industrial demand is just going to continue to grow. It's not like we're going to live in a society where they're going to abandon electronics, where electric vehicles are considered, no thank you, we're going to shift away from them. We also have medical usage for silver as well. And the solar panel, green energy is big. Whether you like it or not, whether you're a proponent to other forms of energy, doesn't really matter. The fact of the truth is that is the area that are going into, and a lot of investment is in there. So I think this industrial demand is not going to subside. I think it's just going to increase. So ultimately, what you want to do with your silver right now, take into account these things that we just talked about. If you've got concerns and you think that the silver price is going to bottom out again and you need the money, take advantage of it. If not, take a look and see where it goes. I'm personally going to hold on to mine, see what happens with it. If I need it, though, it's nice to know that it's there. Ultimately, I hope that every one of us never needs to sell those silver, that we're perfectly fine financially, and that this is something ultimately that we can pass on to our family, and if we're blessed, to our children, so that it gives them a little bit of a nest egg, so that if they need it, it's available to them. So, as to what you want to do with it, wish everyone the best. I hope we've learned a little bit today, and as always, happy stacking, happy collecting.